Imagine a time when one man, just one man, held the fate of all Europe in his hands. A man who could stand alone against armies 3 times his size and still emerge victorious. A man so brilliant, so cunning, that every time he fought, history seemed to bend to his will. Napoleon Bonaparte was that man. But here's the question. What made him so unstoppable? What was the single most powerful reason why no one could defeat him, despite all their efforts? In the next 09 minutes, we're going to unravel the simple reason why Napoleon was virtually invincible on the battlefield, and why, despite all his brilliance, he ultimately met his downfall. Stay with me, because this isn't just a history lesson. It's a deep dive into the mind of a man who redefined the rules of war, conquered most of Europe, and left an indelible mark on history. Welcome to history, as you've never seen it before. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte and the simple reason nobody could defeat him. Napoleon Bonaparte. Born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, far from the halls of European power, he seemed an unlikely candidate for greatness. The son of an impoverished lawyer, Napoleon's early years were marked by struggle, by hardship. His family had little wealth, and Corsica, a French colony, was a place on the fringes of European politics. His chances of rising through the ranks were slim. But there was one thing Napoleon had that no one could take from him: ambition. And ambition, when matched with intellect, can turn the course of history. At the age of 9, Napoleon was sent to mainland France to study at military school. He wasn't a natural at first. His peers mocked his thick Corsican accent, his unrefined manners, but one thing became clear. Napoleon understood war better than anyone else. His mind was a battlefield in itself. By the time he was 16, Napoleon had graduated as an officer and found himself in the midst of the chaos of the French Revolution. The French army was in turmoil, split by political factions and plagued by poor leadership. But for a man like Napoleon, chaos wasn't a weakness. It was an opportunity. In 1793, at just 24 years old, Napoleon was given command of the French forces in the siege of Toulon. This was his moment. Napoleon's rapid rise from a low-ranking officer to a general wasn't due to chance. It was because he had something others didn't: vision. He didn't just fight the battle, he thought through every possible move his enemies might make, and then he outsmarted them. It was this ability to think several steps ahead that would become his trademark. As the years passed, Napoleon's victories began to accumulate. His strategic genius earned him the respect of his peers and the fear of his enemies. But Napoleon wasn't just about theory, he was a man of action. And when action came, it came fast. Napoleon believed in one thing above all: speed. His army didn't just march, they moved like a strike of lightning, swarming across Europe, catching his enemies off guard at every turn. When Napoleon attacked, he attacked with such ferocity and precision that his enemies barely had time to react. By 1804, Napoleon had ascended to the throne of France, becoming emperor. From there, his ambitions grew even larger. He was no longer just a general. He was a leader on a mission to reshape the entire continent. By now, it should be clear, Napoleon was not just another military leader. But here's where things get really interesting. As we dig deeper, we see that what made Napoleon so successful wasn't just his army, his resources, or even his tactics, it was his mind. Napoleon had an almost supernatural ability to predict the future of a battle before it even began. His understanding of warfare was so advanced that he could read the battlefield like a book. Let's take the Battle of Austerlitz, 1805. Napoleon faced off against a coalition army of Russian and Austrian forces. The odds were stacked against him. He was outnumbered nearly 2-1. His enemies thought they had him cornered. And yet, Napoleon saw an opening. He purposely weakened his right flank, luring the enemy to attack it. When they did, they walked right into his trap. Napoleon had anticipated their every move. He knew exactly where to strike, exactly when. The result? A crushing victory that turned the tide of the war. With 40,000 enemy casualties and fewer than 2,000 French losses. It was a brilliant, near-flawless victory. But Napoleon didn't stop there. Every battle he fought, he innovated. At the heart of Napoleon's genius was his ability to adapt, to think not just about tactics, but about strategy. He could shift his forces, outmaneuver his enemies, and seize the initiative in ways no one else could even imagine. Napoleon's corps system, for example, was revolutionary. Instead of relying on a single large unit, he divided his army into several smaller independent corps. These corps could operate on their own but also come together when needed. They were fast, flexible, and, most importantly, difficult to predict. I mean, who wouldn't want an army that could operate like a well-oiled machine, splitting into smaller units that could show up wherever the enemy least expected? It's like if you had a phone with unlimited data, unlimited battery, and unlimited speed. Imagine how unstoppable you'd feel. This adaptability became Napoleon's key to defeating armies that were far larger than his own. But his genius wasn't just about numbers or tactics. Napoleon understood something that other commanders didn't: the human mind. By 1812, Napoleon had conquered most of Europe. He was at the height of his power. But this is where things start to get even more complicated. Because what truly made Napoleon so dangerous wasn't just his strategy or tactics, it was his ability to control the psychology of warfare. Napoleon didn't just command an army, he commanded loyalty, devotion, even fear. He inspired his soldiers to fight, not out of duty but out of a belief in his vision. They didn't follow him because they had to. They followed him because they wanted to. They believed in him. What makes a man like Napoleon so terrifying isn't just his tactical brilliance. It's his ability to make his soldiers and his enemies believe that they could not possibly defeat him. He turned war into a game of the mind, where his opponents were not just fighting against soldiers, they were fighting against Napoleon himself. And when you're up against someone who can control the narrative of a battle, who can shape how you perceive your own strength and weaknesses, it's not just a fight for territory, it's a fight for your very will to keep going. Napoleon knew that to win, you had to break your enemy's spirit. And when the enemy was a leader of men, that meant breaking the leader's will. But as brilliant as Napoleon was, even he wasn't invincible. His power was built on momentum, on constant victory after victory. The problem with that? Momentum can break, and when it does, everything comes crashing down. Napoleon's greatest gamble was his invasion of Russia in 1812. He underestimated the Russian winter, overextended his forces, and made one critical miscalculation that would change everything. But what exactly went wrong? Was it Napoleon's hubris, his overconfidence, or was there a deeper reason that even the greatest military mind in history couldn't avoid his downfall? Stick around to find out, because in the next chapter, we'll uncover the single mistake that shattered Napoleon's empire. And it wasn't just a battle lost. It was the beginning of the end for a man who seemed to have conquered the world. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for part 2. The fall of Napoleon is just as fascinating as his rise, and you won't want to miss it.